I read 11 books in 30 days, all in Spanish. Let me tell you why. I would consider myself quite a productive person. I get quite a lot done, but lately I haven't been able to shake this feeling that whilst I don't waste my time, I don't completely make the most of it either. Enter this challenge. So for context, some of you might remember that last year I gave myself the challenge of reading 12 books in 12 weeks. I got a lot out of that experience and I was pretty proud of that achievement, until about a month or so later when I saw this.
In 29 days between mid-January and mid-February, I read 10 books. And by books, I mean this kind of book, not this kind of book, in my current target language, which is Swedish.
And so, not to be outdone, I thought,
this guy, I'll do 11.
Well, the actual reason isn't solely to do with my pettiness and immaturity, but we'll get to that in a second. First, let's talk about the details and the how. So I'll start off by saying that these are real novels, some shorter, some longer, of course, but I was reading proper books. The only caveat, so to speak, is that I was technically listening to the audiobooks rather than reading in the physical form most of the time. If you think that's cheating, I don't care, it's not. But some of you might be thinking, but what happens if you lose focus or lose track of what's happening? Well, I did consider that, and so what I decided to do was to try and write a super short summary of what had just happened after each chapter. When I say super short, I mean super short. The notes would make no sense to anyone not already reading the book, but it was enough to make sure that I knew more or less what was happening and to remind myself of what had just happened when I picked up the book again. Meaning I only had to repeat the parts where I really didn't have any idea what was happening. Of the 11 books that I read, 3 were books that I had already read in Spanish because I was interested to see what the experience would be like reading the same book with a higher level. I also tried to include a bit of a range of different styles and genres of books. Some were more modern, others less so, and I decided to add in a non-fiction book just to see how I got on with it really. As I said, the books varied in length, but the average length of one of the audiobooks was just over 9.25 hours, and in total it was just over 100 hours of audiobook listening, which meant that I needed to do just under 3.5 hours of listening per day, not including repeating any of the parts that I didn't really understand, which is quite a lot of books. But obviously it's one thing to have done a load of reading, but what did I actually get out of it? I mentioned that one of the reasons I wanted to undertake this challenge was because of seeing Lamont's video, and whilst pettiness and immaturity were driving factors, the main thing I got from that video was actually inspiration. Because I know that Lamont has a job, a wife and kids and other interests and commitments, and knowing he was able to fit that amount of reading into this amount of time with all that going on at the same time made me think, well, I could probably do that too. Especially given that whilst I do have a job and a partner and other commitments and interests, I don't have kids, and I've heard that they can be quite time consuming. And so having this big target that was a bit scary and a bit intimidating, but also within reason for my circumstances, forced me to actively challenge my focus and commitment every day. 3.5 hours isn't necessarily an astronomical amount of time, but it's still a lot of time to put in, so it meant that I had to be very diligent in using any spare time that I had throughout the day. And thinking about this on a consistent basis made me realise how much more exposure to the language I can fit into my days without having to make drastic changes to my routine if I'm focused and organised with my time. Another thing was that alongside the challenge of fitting in the time, I was also reading some quite challenging books. But I actually found the fact that the content was challenging generally meant that I was a lot more focused because I had to pay that little bit extra attention to really follow what was happening and really understand what was going on. And because of that challenge, I really feel like my ability to maintain my focus and attention has really improved during these 30 days. And finally, as is usually the case if I do an intensive style challenge like this, is that whilst from an outsider's perspective you might not notice a huge improvement in my level, the general improvement in comfortability that I felt from such a higher level of exposure to the language than usual is phenomenal. But actually, what I got out of these 30 days during the 30 days wasn't the most important thing for me. The main reason I did this challenge was because I wanted to challenge my own beliefs about how much I could really get done with the time that I actually have. Because I think sometimes we let ourselves believe that we don't have enough time, but often that's not really true if we really look at how we're spending our time. Of course, everyone has different situations, so different people have different limitations in regards to the total amount of time that they can dedicate to language learning. But a lot of us can also do a much better job of being more effective and more productive with the time that we do have if we're more mindful about how we use it. I wouldn't aim to maintain this kind of intense rhythm forever, but challenging myself in this way forced me to look at how I organize my time and helped me to create better habits moving forward that will in turn help me to continue to improve in my language learning. And the momentum that you can build from increasing your total amount of exposure over short periods of time can really help boost your level of comfortability and confidence with a language, and can even help you to push through some of those plateaus if you're feeling a little bit stuck. And so whilst there's no reason to do this specific challenge, I do think it's good to try and challenge yourself over shorter periods of time. So here's my challenge to you. Try and pay more attention to how you spend your time in relation to your goals. Be mindful of how you organize and prioritize your days, and you might just find you have a little bit more time than you initially realized. Because here's the thing, that extra 15 minutes a day, which might seem a little pointless or even insignificant, will add up to over 90 hours of extra exposure if you do that every day for a year, which I would be willing to bet would move you at least a little closer towards your current goals. If you're interested in which books I actually read, I'll leave a list in the description, and if you're curious about how I got my Spanish to a level where I could do a challenge like this, you're going to want to check out this video.